Let's open a chapter that introduces a really mature idea in AI governance, that there's no single one-size-fits-all approach. Governance has to be tailored, and understanding why is what this chapter is all about. So here's our path. First, we'll explore the factors that shape how an organization should govern AI. Things like its size and maturity, the industry and regulations it operates under, the specific products and services it offers, and its appetite for risk. Two organizations can both use AI, yet need quite different governance, and we'll see exactly why. Then we'll shift to a second crucial idea: understanding the different actors in the AI value chain. We'll look at developers, providers, deployers, and users and discover that each one carries different responsibilities and obligations. And finally, we'll tie it together by examining how governance implications shift depending on which role an organization plays. Here's how I want you to read this chapter. Resist the urge to look for one perfect answer. Instead, keep asking, it depends on what? Because that's the heart of tailored governance, recognizing that context changes everything. By the end, you'll think less like someone following a checklist and more like a true governance professional. Let's begin. Let's start with one of the most practical factors shaping AI governance: the size and maturity of the organization. This matters more than people often assume, so let's dig in. Here's the basic insight. A small startup and a large multinational simply cannot govern AI the same way, and they shouldn't try to. Their resources, structures, and needs are worlds apart. Let me paint the contrast. Picture a 10-person startup. They don't have a dedicated governance committee, a legal department, and a risk team. If you handed them the governance setup of a giant bank, they'd be crushed by the overhead and probably ignore it entirely. For them, governance needs to be lean and practical, perhaps a few key people wearing several hats. Now picture a massive enterprise with thousands of employees and hundreds of AI systems. For them, informal governance would be reckless. They need formal committees, clear policies, and structured oversight simply to keep track of it all. Maturity matters too. An organization just beginning its AI journey needs foundational, simple governance, while one with years of experience can support something far more sophisticated. Here's the governance lesson. Effective governance fits the organization. It doesn't get copied blindly from somewhere else. Too little governance for a large, complex organization is dangerous, but too much for a small one is wasteful and gets abandoned. So as a professional, always ask, what's the right amount of governance for this particular organization given its size and maturity? Matching the approach to the reality is a sign of real expertise. Let's look at another powerful factor shaping how AI must be governed: the industry sector and its regulatory environment. Where an organization operates dramatically changes the rules of the game. Here's the core idea. Some industries are heavily regulated, others much less so, and that difference profoundly affects governance needs. The same AI system might face strict requirements in one sector and almost none in another. Let me make this vivid with a comparison. Imagine an AI tool used to recommend products in online retail. If it makes a mistake, the consequence is usually a poor recommendation, annoying but minor, and the regulation is relatively light. Now imagine that same kind of AI making decisions in healthcare or banking. Suddenly, we're talking about people's health and financial lives, and the regulatory scrutiny is intense. The stakes and the rules are completely different. Think about sectors like finance, healthcare, and insurance. They've long operated under tight regulation because the harm from mistakes is so serious. When AI enters those spaces, it inherits all that scrutiny plus new AI-specific rules on top. Here's the governance takeaway. You can't assess AI governance needs without knowing the industry context. A governance approach that's perfectly adequate in a lightly regulated sector could be dangerously insufficient in a heavily regulated one. So as a professional, always ask early, what industry is this and what regulations already govern it? Because the sector sets the baseline expectations. Understanding the regulatory landscape isn't optional. It's the backdrop against which all your governance decisions must make sense. Let's explore how an organization's actual products, services, and business objectives shape its AI governance. Because what a company does directly determines what its AI risks look like. Here's the idea: AI governance isn't abstract, it has to respond to how AI is actually used in the business. And that use depends entirely on the products and services involved. Different offerings carry different risks. Let me show you with two examples. Imagine a company that uses AI internally to optimize its warehouse logistics. The risks are mostly operational. If it fails, packages get delayed. Annoying, but contained. Now picture a company whose core product is an AI tool that gives medical advice to consumers. The risks there are enormous, touching health, safety, and trust. Same technology category, wildly different governance needs, all because of what the product actually does. Business objectives matter too. What is the organization trying to achieve with AI, and who does it affect? An AI used to entertain has different stakes than one used to make decisions about people's lives. Here's the governance insight. You have to look at what the AI actually does in the context of the business, not just whether AI is present. Two companies can both say we use AI, yet need completely different governance because their products and objectives differ. So, as a professional, always connect governance to the real use case. Ask, what does this AI actually do? For whom? And what happens if it goes wrong? The answers, rooted in the organization's products and goals, are what tell you how serious your governance needs to be. Let's tackle two related concepts that quietly shape every governance decision: risk tolerance and risk appetite. These terms come up constantly, so let's make sure you truly understand them. Here's the simple version. Risk appetite is how much risk an organization is willing to take on in pursuit of its goals. Risk tolerance is the acceptable variation around that, how much they can stomach before they have to act. Think of appetite as the target and tolerance as the boundary lines on either side. Let me make it human. Imagine two people investing money. One is bold, comfortable with big swings for the chance of big returns. That's a high risk appetite. The other wants safety above all. That's a low appetite. Neither is wrong, they're just different. Organizations are exactly the same with AI. Here's why this matters for governance. An organization with a low risk appetite, say a hospital or a bank, will demand very cautious AI governance, lots of testing, oversight, and safeguards. An organization with a higher appetite, perhaps a fast moving tech startup, might accept more uncertainty to innovate quickly. Their governance will look different, and appropriately so. But here's an important nuance. Risk appetite isn't a free pass to be reckless. Even a bold organization has limits. Certain risks like serious harm to people or breaking the law are off the table regardless. Here's the governance lesson. Tailoring governance means aligning it to the organization's genuine risk appetite and tolerance while never ignoring the hard limits that protect people and ensure legality. So, as a professional, always ask, how much risk is this organization truly willing and able to accept? That answer calibrates how tight your governance needs to be. Now we shift to the second big theme of this chapter, the different actors in the AI value chain. And we begin with AI developers. Understanding who does what is essential because responsibilities differ by role. So who is an AI developer? In simple terms, this is the party that actually builds or creates the AI system, designing it, training it, and shaping how it works. They're at the origin of the AI's existence. Here's why their responsibilities are distinctive. Because developers create the system, they have the deepest influence over its fundamental qualities, how it's trained, what data it learns from, and what safeguards are built in from the start. Decisions made here ripple through everything that follows. Let me give you an example. Imagine a company that develops an AI model for analyzing job applications. As the developer, they're responsible for things like ensuring the training data is appropriate, testing the model for bias, and documenting its limitations clearly. If they bake a problem in at this stage, everyone downstream inherits it. Do you see why their role carries such weight? Here's an important point. Developers often can't foresee every possible use of their system, but they're responsible for building it soundly and being transparent about what it can and can't do. That documentation and honesty becomes a lifeline for everyone who uses it later. Here's the governance takeaway. Developers carry foundational responsibility. They shape the AI at its core. As a governance professional, when you assess a system, ask who developed this and did they build it responsibly and document it honestly. Because much of what determines whether an AI can be governed well was decided right here at the developer's hands. Let's continue through the value chain and look at AI providers, a role that's closely related to developers but importantly distinct. Getting this distinction clear will sharpen your understanding considerably. Here's the idea. A provider is the party that places an AI system on the market or makes it available to others, often under their own name or brand. Sometimes the provider is also the developer, but not always. A provider might take an AI system and offer it to customers even if someone else built parts of it. Let me explain why this matters with an example. Imagine a company that takes an AI model, perhaps built with components from elsewhere, packages it up, brands it, and sells it to businesses. Even if they didn't create every piece, by putting it on the market under their name, they take on provider obligations. They're the ones presenting it to the world as ready to use. Here's why the distinction matters for governance. Providers carry responsibility for what they release into the market, ensuring it meets requirements, comes with proper information, and is suitable for its stated purpose. They're a key accountability point because they're the bridge between creation and real-world use. Think of it like a brand selling a product. Even if they didn't manufacture every component, by selling it under their label, they're responsible for it being safe and as described. Here's the governance lesson. The provider role exists so that someone is clearly accountable for what reaches the market. As a professional, always ask, who is the provider here? Who's putting this system out into the world? Because that party shoulders specific obligations, and identifying them is essential to knowing where responsibility truly sits. Let's move further along the chain to AI deployers, a role that's especially important because it's where AI meets the real world and real people. Many of you may actually work as deployers, so pay close attention. Here's who they are. A deployer is the party that actually puts an AI system to use in a real setting, using it on real people or real decisions, often a system someone else developed and provided. They're the ones who take the AI and apply it in practice. Let me make this concrete. Imagine a hospital that buys an AI tool to help prioritize patients. The hospital didn't build it and didn't sell it, but they're using it on actual patients. That makes them the deployer, and it brings real responsibilities. Now, here's a point I really want to land. People sometimes assume that if you didn't build the AI, you're off the hook for how it behaves. That's a dangerous misunderstanding. Deployers carry serious obligations because they control how the system is actually used in context. Think about it. The deployer decides where to apply the AI, how to integrate it, and crucially, how to monitor it once it's running. If a deployed system starts behaving badly with real users, who's positioned to notice and respond? The deployer. That's why monitoring is such a central deployer responsibility. Here's the governance takeaway. Deployment isn't the easy final step. It's where harm often actually materializes. As a professional, remember that using someone else's AI doesn't transfer away your responsibility. Deployers must implement thoughtfully and monitor continuously. So always ask, who's deploying this and are they watching it properly in the real world? Because that's where governance gets truly tested. Let's look at the final actor in our value chain, the AI users, the people who actually interact with or rely on the AI system in their daily work or lives. This role rounds out the picture nicely. So, who counts as a user? In this context, it's typically the individuals who use the AI as part of their tasks. Perhaps an employee using an AI tool to help with their job, or a person relying on its outputs to make decisions. They're at the front line of actual interaction. Here's why users matter for governance. Even a perfectly built and properly deployed AI system can cause problems if used inappropriately. The human at the keyboard has real influence over outcomes. Let me give you an example. Imagine an AI tool that helps draft documents. Used well, with the person reviewing and verifying the output, it's a great assistant. But imagine a user who blindly trusts everything it produces, copying and pasting without checking, even when the AI makes things up. Same tool, very different outcome, all because of how the user engaged with it. So, what are a user's responsibilities? Mainly, using the AI appropriately and understanding its limitations. That means knowing what the tool is good for, what it's not, and when human judgment must step in. A user who understands that AI can be confidently wrong will treat its outputs with healthy caution. Here's the governance lesson. Users are the last line of defense and sometimes the last point of failure. Good governance includes equipping users to understand limitations and use systems wisely, which connects right back to that role-specific training we discussed. So as a professional, never overlook the user. Ask, do the people actually using this system understand how to use it responsibly? Because at the very end of the chain, it's the human who either upholds or undermines everything the governance was meant to achieve. Let's close this chapter by pulling the threads together and looking at how governance implications shift across all these roles. This is where everything we've discussed clicks into a coherent whole. Here's the central insight. The same AI system involves different parties, the developer, provider, deployer, and user, and each one carries different responsibilities. Governance isn't a single lump of accountability sitting in one place, it's distributed across the chain. Let me walk you through a single example to show this beautifully. Imagine an AI hiring tool. The developer is responsible for building it soundly and testing for bias. The provider is responsible for putting it on the market properly, with clear information about what it does. The deployer, the employer using it, is responsible for applying it appropriately and monitoring it on real candidates. And the users, the recruiters, are responsible for using it wisely and not blindly trusting it. See how the responsibility flows and shifts at each stage? Here's why this matters so much. A common governance failure is assuming someone else is responsible. The deployer assumes the developer handled fairness. The developer assumes the deployer monitors use, and harm slips through the gap. Clarity about who's responsible for what is the antidote. Here's the closing lesson for this chapter. Effective governance requires understanding where you sit in the chain and owning your specific responsibilities while ensuring the whole chain is covered. As a professional, always map it out. Who are the developers, providers, deployers, and users here? And is each fulfilling their part? Because AI governance done well is a relay race where every runner knows their leg and no responsibility gets dropped between hands. That clear-eyed view of distributed responsibility is exactly what tailored, mature governance looks like.